Okay, in this video we're going to go over the hip throw and double leg. So let me pull up the video in just one sec. Alright, here we go. We've got two individuals setting up. One setting up for a hip throw, the individual in white here. They're both in a neutral clinch. Neither person has an advantage. But you notice this individual here in white, how he's leaning his weight out across the arm of the individual in red. That's allowing him to lean further over without having to muscle the person. He's using his own weight to drag this person down, and that's going to allow him to, when he turns, to slide his hip in this space, so it creates a greater space. If they were upright, neither person would really have an advantage, and they could try to trip each other up. They really wouldn't have any need of throwing the hip into it, and it would just be a battle of strength. But here he's leaning over. It's going to allow him to swivel his weight and to shift his hip and slide it in so that he can lift the other person's hip off the ground. So let's go ahead and watch the video. One other thing I want to point out is notice how he's looking towards the ground. That's key, because if he was to look up, he would be more upright, giving this individual in red more leverage. You notice here the individual in red is also looking down, but his gaze is at a different angle. He's a little bit more upright. He's not going to have the leverage. They're also in a neutral clinch, which places them in the same position. So one arm over, so the individual in white here has his arm covering the individual in red, and then his other arm is underneath the armpit of the individual in red on the other side. So essentially they're in the same position, so neither person has an advantage when it comes to takedowns or when it comes to strikes. They're essentially in the same position, one arm in, one arm out. So let's go ahead and watch this takedown for just one sec. So he shifts around and gets his hip into place and is able to throw this individual to the ground. So let's go ahead and watch this again. Shifting around, and uses his weight, or uses his hip, to get that individual's feet up off the ground. So here they are. This is a neutral clinch. This is what I was talking about. Covering the arm, and then this individual in white here has his arm underneath this guy's waist, or underneath his armpit. It's just a little lower. You can't see it in this frame. So I'm going to go ahead and play. Again, he's looking down towards the floor. He's going to shift his weight around, and here's an important element. Look at what his feet are doing. He gets all the way around, and his feet were pointing in the opposite direction. Let me rewind that for just a second so that you can see. Notice how their feet are going in the same direction. This is important. It allows this individual to slide his hip into place, so when he lifts or straightens his legs, it's going to allow him to lift the individual in red up off the ground, and that will make it really difficult for this individual in red to stop the takedown. In fact, almost impossible, because he's off the ground. He has no traction, no way to really stop the takedown at that point. He's going to the ground as soon as those feet come up off the ground. But notice here the feet are pointing in the same direction. So let me go ahead and play this so that you can see it all the way through. He also hangs on to the arm. Notice how he hangs on to this arm here. He could catch an arm bar there if he wanted to. Alright, the next one is a double leg, but this is a different variation of a double leg that you might see with wrestling. It doesn't require as much strength to drive forward. It doesn't require as much strength to lift the individual. You're using leverage, and the trip gives you more leverage to take the person down. So again, we have the individual in white here. He's shooting in for a takedown. Ideally, you would want to set this takedown up with some strikes. So you'd want to throw a punch that would get this individual in red. He'd have to respond to the punches, or otherwise he's going to get hit. So you would punch towards the face to get the hands up. That would get the hands away from the hip. By not punching, this individual in red really has an opportunity to lock in some sort of choke here, or he can use a crossface, which is a way of getting this person, getting control of his head so that he can no longer execute the takedown. So I'll go ahead and play this all the way through so that you can see it, and then we'll rewind and talk about some of the elements. So he shoots in, grabs both legs, and uses his other leg that's behind the lead leg of the attacker to take him down. So he shoots in, grabs both legs, and uses that other leg to trip. Let's rewind that and look at it for just 1 sec so I can break it down for you. Okay, here's some important elements. When he shoots in for this takedown, his head is going to go to this side of the body. Now, he could plant the head right in the middle. It's just he's not going to be able to use as much of his shoulder to drive. In MMA, in mixed martial arts, placing the head to the side could be problematic because the individual could execute a guillotine choke or a crossface and really, and this could happen in wrestling too. They could use a crossface to peel you off the hip, but in MMA they could lock in a choke. So you've got to make sure your head is pinned really close to this individual's hip, especially if it's to the outside, and that will neutralize the guillotine. It really won't give them a handle. If they do go for a guillotine, there's another double leg that you can set up on from there. So as long as your ability to transition from takedown to takedown is good, it's not necessarily a problem. And that's anytime you do takedowns, you don't really want to shoot for just one takedown and that's the only one that you have planned. You want to make sure that you can transition well from one takedown to the next, and that's what is going to allow you to take somebody down and make it really hard for them to stop your takedowns, is your ability to transition. If one takedown doesn't work, you can easily transition to the next, so you're thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead of your opponent. So he shoots in here. Let me pause this. This leg here, his lead leg, what becomes his lead leg, steps behind the lead leg of the opponent, of the guy in the red shirt. That's going to give him some leverage, making it hard for the guy in the red to sprawl. So once he steps behind, he can also grab a hold of the legs with his hands. Let me speed this up here. So notice here, here's probably the best frame of this. Head to the outside, that's allowing him to use the whole shoulder to drive into the hips. He's grabbing both legs to prevent the individual from sprawling, and he's going to, as he drives forward, he's going to scoop this leg out, and that's going to force his shoulder forward, giving him the leverage he needs to finish the takedown. So let me go ahead and play that. So right here, see how he's driving forward? Once he scoops this leg, the leg can't go back. He's driving the shoulder into the hip. That forces the individual in red, it forces his center of gravity back, and then it's easy to take the individual down. So let's watch this one last time. Steps forward, shoots in for the takedown, and then every once in a while adds in a punch to add insult to injury. So hope you enjoyed the movie, and I hope it explained the hip throw and the double leg. So now that if you didn't know how to execute them before, it will give you a better idea. So hope to see you in the next video.